The sky was painted with hues of orange and purple as the sun dipped below the horizon, signaling the end of another eventful day for a group of friends embarking on a road trip through the countryside. Mark, Sarah, Alex, and Emily were excited to explore new territories and create lasting memories during their summer vacation. However, little did they know that their adventure was about to take an ominous turn. As they drove down winding country roads, Mark decided to take a detour in search of a shortcut to their next destination. The GPS signal weakened, and the once familiar roads began to feel foreign. The narrow, overgrown path they chose seemed to lead them deeper into isolation, away from civilization. As the darkness enveloped the landscape, the friends noticed a faint glow in the distance. Intrigued, they followed the eerie light, hoping to find a place to rest for the night. The glow led them to an old, dilapidated sign that read, "Abandoned Elmwood Farm." Although hesitant, the weariness from their journey and the allure of shelter made them decide to explore the farm. The path to the farmhouse was overgrown with weeds, and the buildings were cloaked in shadows. The once thriving farm now lay in ruins, a mere shell of its former self. As they stepped cautiously through the decaying structures, a chill ran down their spines. Cobwebs draped across the rotting wooden beams, and the stale air was heavy with a sense of desolation. Sarah, always the adventurous one, suggested they split up to search for any signs of life or supplies. Alex, who was usually eager to go along with any plan, hesitated but agreed. Emily, the most cautious of the group, protested, voicing her concerns about exploring an abandoned place at night. Ignoring Emily's worries, they dispersed into different directions, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. Mark stumbled upon an old journal left behind, recounting bizarre happenings on the farm many years ago. The journal spoke of a gruesome discovery of human remains and an unexplained presence that had driven the former residents to madness. Meanwhile, Sarah and Alex discovered an underground cellar filled with preserved jars of what appeared to be vegetables, but something about it felt unsettling. They also found worn-out shackles and tools that sent shivers down their spines. As the night wore on, unease settled among the friends. The farmhouse seemed to come alive with unexplained creaks and distant whispers. Fear began to gnaw at them, and they instinctively started to regroup, seeking the safety of each other's presence. But their relief was short-lived. Emily, having wandered deeper into the woods surrounding the farmhouse, stumbled upon a hidden graveyard. The gravestones were old and weathered, with names and dates barely legible. A chilling wind blew, and the trees seemed to bend and sway, as if mourning the souls that rested beneath the soil. Terror gripped Emily's heart as she tried to call out to her friends, but her voice seemed to vanish into the darkness. Panicking, she turned to return to the farmhouse, only to find a shadowy figure lurking behind her. Paralyzed with fear, she could do nothing but stare into the abyss of its eyes. Back at the farmhouse, Mark, Sarah, and Alex began to worry about Emily's absence. Their calls echoed through the empty corridors, but there was no response. They decided to venture out into the woods to find her, armed only with flashlights and a growing sense of dread. Their search led them to the hidden graveyard, where they found Emily standing motionless, her face pale and expressionless. She seemed almost catatonic, and her friends had trouble getting a response from her. Fearful of what they had encountered, they quickly returned to the farmhouse, bringing Emily with them. As they huddled together in the dimly lit living room, they shared their disturbing discoveries with each other. The journal, the cellar, and the graveyard all hinted at a dark and sinister history that the farm held. They began to realize that they were not alone. Something malevolent lurked within the crumbling walls. Just as they attempted to formulate a plan to leave the farm at first light, the air turned heavy, and an ominous presence engulfed them. They heard faint whispers, indistinct but haunting. The walls seemed to close in, and the temperature dropped drastically, making their breaths visible in the frigid air. Fear reached its peak, and the friends knew they could not stay in that cursed place any longer. They made a desperate dash for the exit, but the doors slammed shut before they could reach safety. Panic consumed them, and their hearts pounded as they struggled to find another way out. The events of that night had taken a toll on their nerves, but they knew they had to keep their wits about them if they were to survive. In the flickering candlelight, they discovered a hidden passage leading to the cellar. Fueled by desperation, they ventured down into the dark abyss, hoping it would lead them to freedom. As they descended further, the air grew thicker, and the oppressive darkness seemed to suffocate them. Shadows danced around their flickering light, and chilling whispers echoed through the subterranean tunnels. They pressed on, driven by the hope that this path would eventually lead them to safety. However, the deeper they delved, the more they felt the presence of malevolence closing in around them. Their flashlight beams caught glimpses of grotesque symbols and eerie markings adorning the walls of the ancient tunnels. It became apparent that the farm's history was intertwined with sinister rituals and dark practices. In the distance, they heard a faint sound of chanting, growing louder as they approached what seemed to be an underground chamber. Fearful yet determined, they moved closer, their senses on high alert. The sight that greeted them was beyond their darkest nightmares. The chamber was filled with a congregation of hooded figures, their faces obscured by darkness. The chilling chant intensified as they raised their hands in what appeared to be a ritualistic ceremony. The friends crouched in the shadows, praying they wouldn't be discovered. As the ritual reached its crescendo, the floor beneath them trembled, and an otherworldly force seemed to surge through the chamber. The hooded figures' faces became illuminated for a brief moment, revealing a terrifying visage of madness and malevolence. Unable to bear witness to the horror any longer, Mark, Sarah, Alex, and Emily decided to make a desperate dash for escape. Their hearts pounded in their chests, and adrenaline fueled their flight through the winding tunnels. They stumbled and fell, driven by sheer will to evade the sinister beings behind them. The passages seemed endless, and just as hope began to fade, they saw a faint glimmer of light ahead. Determination overpowered their exhaustion, and they rushed toward the opening. Bursting into the open air, they found themselves at the back of the farmhouse, facing the woods. Without looking back, they ran through the night, guided only by the pale light of the moon. The farm and its malevolence were now behind them, but the horrors they witnessed would forever haunt their memories. As the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, the friends emerged from the woods and found their way back to the main road. Exhausted, shaken, and forever changed, they climbed into their car and continued their journey, grateful to leave the cursed farm behind them. Little did they know that the horrors of Elmwood Farm were not limited to its ruins. The malevolent force they encountered that night would follow them, creeping into their dreams and testing the limits of their sanity. The road ahead would be fraught with terror, and they would soon realize that some horrors are impossible to escape. This is just the beginning of their harrowing journey, as the sinister secrets of Elmwood Farm were only the first chapter in a nightmare they could never wake up from. The road ahead would be paved with darkness and despair, and the true horrors of the past would come to life, seeking vengeance for the trespassers who dared to uncover their long-buried secrets. The events of that fateful night at Elmwood Farm lingered in the minds of the four friends long after they had escaped its clutches. Each passing day seemed to blend into a nightmarish blur, as the memories of hooded figures, haunting whispers, and the malevolent presence plagued their thoughts. Despite their attempts to find solace in each other's company, a growing unease settled among them. Back on the road, the group struggled to find a sense of normalcy amidst the horror they had witnessed. The once jubilant atmosphere in the car had been replaced by an oppressive silence, punctuated only by occasional glances and nervous fidgeting. Each mile they traveled felt like an eternity, as they couldn't help but feel that they were being watched by unseen eyes. Their journey took them to a nearby town, where they decided to seek refuge and perhaps gather some information about the forsaken Elmwood Farm. The quaint town seemed like an oasis of tranquility compared to the horrors they had experienced. The locals exchanged polite smiles, unaware of the darkness that lurked behind the travelers' eyes. At a cozy cafe, the friends gathered around a table, attempting to piece together what they had encountered. Emily, the researcher of the group, had been frantically digging through online archives and local legends for any trace of Elmwood Farm's dark history. "Guys, I found something," Emily finally spoke up, her voice tinged with anxiety. According to the records, Elmwood Farm was once owned by the Wilson family, who were rumored to be reclusive and eccentric. There are mentions of strange rituals and unexplained disappearances associated with the farm, dating back centuries. The revelation sent shivers down their spines, confirming their fears that the farm held a dark and sinister past. Sarah's brow furrowed as she recalled the preserved jars they had found in the cellar. "Do you think those jars contained human remains?" she hesitantly asked. Alex grimaced, his mind drifting back to the shackles they had stumbled upon. "It's hard to say, but the atmosphere in that cellar was just wrong. Like we were trespassing on something sacred or cursed." Mark, always the rational thinker, suggested they seek the help of someone knowledgeable about local folklore or history. He remembered passing by a small library on the outskirts of the town earlier, which might hold the key to unlocking the secrets of Elmwood Farm. Upon arriving at the library, they met an elderly librarian named Mrs. Thompson. She had a kindly demeanor and an air of wisdom that seemed to emanate from years of studying the town's history. "Ah, young travelers, what brings you to our humble town?" Mrs. Thompson inquired with a warm smile. "We're seeking information about Elmwood Farm," Mark replied cautiously. "It seems to have a dark past, and we're trying to make sense of the things we encountered there." Mrs. Thompson's smile faded, replaced by a somber expression. "Elmwood Farm is a place burdened by a tragic and sinister history," she began. "The Wilson family, who once owned the farm, were rumored to be practitioners of occult rituals and dark arts. Many people in the town believed they were responsible for the mysterious disappearances of travelers and locals alike." As she continued her tale, the friends listened in rapt attention, their curiosity mixing with dread. Mrs. Thompson explained that over the years, several attempts had been made to investigate the farm, but all efforts were met with failure or unspeakable horror. There have been tales of hooded figures gathering in the dead of night, performing unspeakable rituals that were said to grant them unimaginable power, Mrs. Thompson recounted. Locals often warned travelers to steer clear of Elmwood Farm, as they believed it to be cursed, haunted by the tormented souls of those who had fallen victim to the Wilson family's malevolence. Sarah couldn't help but ask, "Is there any way to break the curse or put an end to the malevolent presence?" The librarian sighed, her eyes filled with sadness. "No one knows for certain. The legends suggest that the curse can only be broken by those who are pure of heart and possess an unwavering courage to confront the darkness head-on. But even then, it is said that the price of facing such malevolence can be too high." The weight of Mrs. Thompson's words settled upon the friends like a heavy shroud. They realized that they had unwittingly stumbled into a world of ancient evil, one that defied explanation or reason. It was a darkness that had endured through generations, and they were now entangled in its malevolent web. Determined to uncover the truth and put an end to the horrors of Elmwood Farm, the friends thanked Mrs. Thompson for her guidance and returned to their car. The sun was setting once more, casting long shadows across the town. As they drove back toward the farm, a mix of fear and resolve gripped their hearts. Arriving at the now familiar path that led to the forsaken farm, they steeled themselves for what lay ahead. They carried with them flashlights, tools, and a newfound determination to confront the darkness that had haunted their nightmares. The air was heavy with an unsettling stillness as they cautiously stepped onto the overgrown path. The once faint glow in the distance now beckoned them with an almost hypnotic allure. The dilapidated sign loomed before them like a warning from the past, but they pressed forward, drawn to the heart of darkness. As they approached the farmhouse, they noticed something peculiar. The cellar door, which had been shut tight during their last visit, was now slightly ajar. Fear surged through their veins, but they knew that the answers they sought might lie within its depths. With trembling hands, they descended into the darkness once more. The familiar scent of decay and the unsettling feeling of being watched enveloped them. However, this time they felt a newfound sense of purpose. as if their presence was a challenge to the malevolence that lurked within. In the cellar, they discovered more clues to the farm's past. Ancient tomes filled with dark incantations, symbols etched into the walls, and remnants of grisly rituals lay scattered around them. The reality of what they were facing became undeniable. They were confronting an ancient evil that had thrived for centuries. As they continued to explore, Emily stumbled upon a faded portrait of a family hanging on a damp wall. It depicted the Wilson family, standing proudly in front of the very farmhouse they now found themselves in. The sinister glint in their eyes sent chills down her spine, and she wondered if the evil had possessed them even in life. Mark noticed a peculiar symbol etched into the floor of the cellar, similar to the ones they had seen in the tunnels. His heart sank as he realized that this symbol might be the key to the malevolence that had taken hold of the farm. Determined to break the curse and put an end to the darkness, they gathered what information they could and devised a plan. Armed with newfound knowledge, they sought to disrupt the dark rituals that bound the malevolence to the farm. It was a dangerous and risky endeavor, but they knew they had no choice but to confront the evil head-on. As the night wore on, the friends stood together in the cellar, surrounded by the symbols of dark magic. With trembling voices, they recited an incantation they had discovered, hoping that it would weaken the malevolent force that held sway over the farm. In the flickering candlelight, a low, guttural growl echoed through the cellar, and the air became charged with an electric energy. The symbols on the floor seemed to pulsate with an unholy life of their own. Fear threatened to paralyze them, but they clung to each other, finding strength in their unity. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, and an otherworldly force surged through the cellar. The dark presence seemed to resist the incantation, fighting back with a vengeful fury. Shadows danced around them, and the walls seemed to close in, threatening to swallow them whole. But the friends refused to yield. With a collective will to conquer the darkness, they repeated the incantation, their voices growing stronger and more resolute with each iteration. It was a battle of wills, a confrontation between pure courage and ancient malevolence. As the incantation reached its climax, the symbols on the floor glowed with a blinding intensity, and a deafening roar filled the cellar. The very foundations of the farmhouse seemed to shake, as if the battle they fought transcended the physical realm. In a final burst of energy, the symbols cracked, and the dark force was thrust back into the depths of the unknown. The malevolent presence retreated, vanishing into the night like a wisp of smoke carried away by the wind. Exhausted and shaken, the friends collapsed to the ground. The cellar fell silent once more, its malevolence now vanquished. The curse that had plagued Elmwood Farm for centuries had finally been broken. As the first rays of dawn painted the horizon, the friends emerged from the farmhouse, their hearts heavy but liberated. They had faced unspeakable horrors and emerged victorious, breaking free from the malevolent grasp that had haunted them. The road ahead was uncertain, and they knew that the shadows of Elmwood Farm would forever remain etched in their memories. But they also knew that they had triumphed over darkness, proving that even in the face of ancient malevolence, courage and unity could conquer all. Their journey was far from over, and they knew that more trials awaited them in the chapters ahead. The sinister secrets of Elmwood Farm had been uncovered, but the friends understood that the world was vast, and there were countless other horrors lurking in its shadows. With a renewed sense of purpose and a bond forged in the crucible of darkness, they continued their road trip, venturing into the unknown. They were no longer just travelers seeking adventure. They were now warriors of light, ready to confront the malevolence that lurked in the darkest corners of the world. The road stretched out before them, winding and uncertain, but they knew that together, they could face whatever horrors lay ahead. The journey of the four friends had only just begun, and as they drove into the distance, they carried with them the knowledge that the world was filled with tales of terror and wonder, waiting to be unraveled by those brave enough to seek them out. And so, they embraced the road ahead, ready to face the next chapter in their tale of horrors, armed with courage, unity, and the knowledge that they were not alone in their battle against the darkness. The road beckoned, and they ventured forth, bound by a bond that could withstand even the darkest of nights.